Our economy has changed significantly in the last 20 years as we've become increasingly globalized, as we've become a more transient culture on a worldwide scale, and we've become a more interconnected global society, especially due to the internet. Um, the United States, because of which, has been somewhat scrutinized, not just by the international community, but from within the U.S. as well. Um, Many different labor unions have really been put off by the idea of American jobs going overseas, partially because of wage disputes. So, if you think about protective masks, an N95 mask that you might wear to protect you in this pandemic type era, um, here in the United States, it might cost somewhere around 10 cents to manufacture an N95 mask. Whereas in China, it might cost 2 or 3 cents. And if that's the case, then people ordering these in large numbers are going to order them from China, thereby placing the manufacturing emphasis overseas. It costs less because there are fewer regulations around labor rights and wage rights for folks overseas. So you can pay a lot less in a new world order for products that influence you. Okay, so there are people who are critical of that, and that's one of the things that Donald Trump harped on in 2016. All these jobs leaving American shores, we're going to try and restore that and restore faith in the American government that they're going to help bring jobs back to the United States. America first mentality. So there is a yin and yang type aspect of globalization. You want to help the world in our increasingly globalized society, all the while understanding that American jobs and American needs stay here. So that's one of the things that we're seeing in our pandemic era. So many things that we rely upon are manufactured in China and places like that. And in this pandemic era, that's kind of a problem. Because if it takes weeks and weeks for N95 masks and other PPE to get here, then that's a problem because we have a need right now. Whereas if something was made on our own shores, not only would Americans be working and adding to the economy and having work, but also the money would stay here and they would get here faster. So I understand the idea of an America First popularity, but I understand also how globalization has its detractions. And the United States has entered various different conflicts like Desert Storm in the Gulf War and the Iraq War in the early to mid 2000s. Thoughtfully because, well, we want to protect our interests in foreign oil, especially in Kuwait and elsewhere in the Middle East. If you destabilize the oil market, that's going to drive prices up or even supply. Okay, that's going to be a very big problem because the United States relies heavily on oil, not just for gasoline refinement, but also because of heating elements that heat up people's homes, especially in the Northeast. And then also for various other different products that are made from oil, like plastics, for example. So, we need to kind of intervene. We've been seen as maybe having a heavy handed diplomacy that leans towards oil and protecting oil. Oh, they've got oil? Well, we're going to protect them. It's kind of how it's seen. Okay? And there are a lot of folks who have been off put by the idea of the United States intervening globally from a militaristic or otherwise economic standpoint. Um, the Gulf War in particular, the United States was fighting to liberate Kuwait from Iraq's annexation. And the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia had harbored over 400,000 American military personnel for that purpose. Okay? The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is also considered to be the home of the Muslim faith. So many Muslims make a pilgrimage to Mecca every year, and that is seen as the homeland for the Muslim faith. And to have troops from non-Muslim countries in the homeland was deemed by some religious fanatics as seen as a violation. You have infidels infiltrating your faith center, if you will. And these religious fanatics also were put off by the United States intervening globally and otherwise being a beacon for being anti their religious fanaticism. So in, in 1993, the World Trade Center actually had a terrorist attack where the World Trade Centers attempted to have, there were terrorists who attempted to blow up the World Trade Centers by planting major bombs in the garage of the World Trade Center in New York City. And it blew up the garage, but otherwise didn't do significant enough damage to really cause mass chaos. But what it did, though, was give rise and notification that there could potentially be terror groups that want to do harm to the United States. And over the course of the next years, one particular fanatic in particular, Osama bin Laden, really took umbrage with the idea of infidel troops coming to the Saudi kingdom, infidel troops coming to their defense. And he formed a religiously fanatic Muslim group whose purpose was to inflict harm upon infidels, most notably the United States. And over the course of the next several years, he put a plot together to bring down the World Trade Center towers. And long story short, some of his lieutenants were able to learn how to fly American jets, and they planned to fly planes into these World Trade Center towers and then into the U.S. Capitol itself. So they chartered jets, or they actually bought tickets in Boston that were scheduled to fly from Boston nonstop to San Francisco. And it was done that way in particular because a jet that's going to have to fly for that long is going to have to carry the largest amount of fuel, which is going to ignite an even bigger flame and explode into greater glory. So, on the morning of September 11, 2001, you have terrorists associated with Al-Qaeda who hijacked 4 planes. And the first one hit the first World Trade Center tower early that morning. And I remember that morning. I was 24 at the time. I was working at a mortgage company, and I didn't have to be at work until 10 that morning, so I kind of slept in. I slept in until about 8 o'clock. And I woke up, and I didn't turn on the TV. I just went to go check my email on my desktop. And I was checking some websites, and I saw all this chaos going on, blowing up, and the first one's about to come down, and it's like, what is it? What? So I turned on the TV, and plain as day, the World Trade Center towers were both on fire. And not but like 30 seconds later, after I turned on the TV, one of them collapsed, like fell. I was in an utter state of shock. And listening to radio reports that morning driving into work, utter state of shock because as I was driving in, the other tower fell. And then watching footage of those planes hit the towers. If one plane hit one of the towers, there could have been some sort of accident, maybe some sort of mishap, computer malfunction. Maybe you could make a case for something like that. It's really fishy and probably something bad, but maybe you can make at least a case. But when the second plane hit the other tower, it was very obvious that this was not an accident. And then come later, the plane that directly hits the Pentagon. And learning that it was actually trying to target the White House or maybe the US Capitol itself. And that there was a fourth plane that crashed in a Pennsylvania field. The hijackers were actually overrun by passengers, and they prevented them from flying it to their destination, and they crashed the plane. I will never forget that day. Um, I'll never forget the fear that washed over me because of it. I'll never forget the images of the planes crashing into the building. I'll never forget the buildings burning on fire and then people jumping out of the windows, dying from 100 stories up. The buildings collapsing, the smoke infiltrating the financial sector of New York. I got to work and they instantly told us that since the financial markets were obviously closed that day, there would be no work that day. Come back later. We'll let you know. So a friend of mine, we went to lunch, just stayed glued to the TV that was on at the time and just saw images of firefighters going up these towers. And you know, I can only imagine the firefighters that observed the fires. They ran up all those steps to try and put out fires only to just have those towers crumble on them. I can only imagine what that was like. Um, I will never forget September 11th, 2001, and just the utter shock and reason for why people did this to our country. I'll never forget it. Our country is exceptionally divided right now. Pro-Trump, anti-Trump, pro-life, pro-choice, Democrat, Republican, white, black, Hispanic, whatever. Our country is very divided. I was sick to my stomach because of 9/11. But I love September 12th. Here's what I mean by that. September 12th, 2001, there was no such thing as a white person or black person. There was no such thing as a Democrat or Republican, liberal, conservative. There was no such thing as gay, straight. There was no such thing as divide. Those people wanted to inflict harm on all of us because we were Americans. Didn't matter your race, your color, gender, ethnicity. Didn't matter about any of that. We were all under attack. We would all pay for our infidelity. All of us. And on September 12th and the months and really the year afterwards, it just became one of these things where, wow, our country was potmarked with American flags everywhere. People would have American flags in their front door, out in their yard. People would wear American flag hats, FDNY and NYPD hats, and all kinds of different stuff that paid homage to the firefighters that died on 9/11. George W. Bush was exceptionally popular at that time. So we're going to get these folks. We're going to smoke Al Qaeda out of their caves. We're going to do this. Okay? Conversely, many Muslims at the time fell under scrutiny. The overwhelming majority of Muslims do not support these fanatic ideas that lead to terrorists like those in Al Qaeda or ISIS today. They don't believe in that. As a matter of fact, many Muslims would actually enlist in our armed forces and fight for America to fight against this. But many Muslims took the brunt of a lot of anger in the post 9/11 era. Okay? Otherwise, though, September 12th, 2001 began a time where our country was exceptionally unified. I wouldn't like the reason why we would have September 12th again, but I'd love that there would be unification. I long for that. And if there's any one thing that this coronavirus pandemic might actually do, maybe It'll help unify us. We are all affected by this. Every single one of us. Whether we are young and healthy and could withstand possibly contracting the coronavirus and getting sick, maybe if I got it, I'd have mild symptoms and I'd be sick for a while and I'd be totally fine after that. But the thought of me getting somebody else sick who might be compromised and then perhaps having very bad reactions or possibly even dying from it, that's sad to me. We're all in this together. And that's something that can hopefully, maybe, drive us to perhaps unify a little bit better. Okay? So that's something to keep in mind. September 11th gave rise to post 9/11. That was a great time in American history, despite a really bad event.